Hi there, and hi there, everyone at home. My name is David Mandel. Welcome to Heritage Auctions and our celebration tonight of Greg Jein, who we're going to be talking so much about. Hopefully for those of you that know about him, and especially for those of you that don't know anything about him, which I think is going to be kind of cool, because it's an incredible collection that he has. It's really a one-of-a-kind collection, but he was a one-of-a-kind guy. I was just telling the audience here, the live audience, I am a comedy writer by trade. I worked at Saturday Night Live, Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Veep, mainly so that I can pay my auction bills. That's really why. I'm like sort of like a prostitute on the streets. Instead of a pimp, it goes to Joe Maddalena. So enjoy that for the rest of the evening, and know that as I'm asking questions, all I'm thinking is, how much can I bid tomorrow? How much can I bid tomorrow? How much can I bid tomorrow? With that in mind, I want to sort of introduce the panel just so that everyone knows who everybody is. And then we'll dive in and we'll talk and whatever, and maybe even we'll take some questions or something at the end, just because that can be fun. So next to me, the man who, there are many ways of introducing him, but I like to say, if you ever wanted to go to a prop get-together or a special effects get-together, he throws the hottest special effects get-togethers in Hollywood, Gene Kozicki.
You're going to have to come to one of them one day.
One day. And I should say, and as we'll
They
get
were
into
supposed
this,
to be secret.
oh, sorry, they don't happen. Yeah. Yeah. The first rule of prop get together is nobody actually cares. But anyway, do these people look like they really care?
Yeah.
I want to go.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Number two, and I should say, friend of Greg's, and that's going to be a big constant here. Friend of Greg's. Next to him is Bill George from ILM. That's what I was told, from ILM, and friend of Greg's. Yep. That's good.
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. And everyone's getting so angry now. This is what happens when you don't prep. Joe Maddalena, here from the wonderful Heritage Auctions, and friend of Greg, who really has masterminded with his team this whole weekend and this auction, which I think honors Greg wonderfully. Hello there. Next to him is very cool. This is Jerry Chang, who was Greg's cousin. And once we get done with these introductions, we're going to start with him because he knew Greg as a kid, and we're going to just start there, which I think is going to be really fascinating and interesting. John Eaves, also from ILM and other places, lots of effects work. Is that fair? Is that allowed to say that? Oh, he brought a crowd. He brought a crowd.
Well,
Yeah.
minus ILM. I wasn't ILM, sadly.
All right.
But
I apologize.
the LA bird.
His title is The John Eaves.
The John Eaves. And then finally, on the far end, yet another good friend of Greg's. What did we say? Film historian, archivist. What do you like there? John Billings. Yeah, yeah, John Billings. Yeah. No applause. I'm sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. No, there you go. Yeah. So to start. And we will get to everybody, but I honestly wanted to start with Greg as a child, if we can, because I think for those of us that are collectors, it comes through early. Like I see it with I have a son and a daughter. My daughter doesn't care. My son lines everything up, and like you keep it in the package and you put it on. So my question first and foremost is, was Greg a collector as a kid, be it like, I don't know, comics or baseball cards, or what, did he have that collector mentality, just to start there?
He was a baseball card collector first.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Age
Oh,
5.
talking to your mic. Sorry.
Age 5. He started collecting baseball cards. He ended up from 1950 to 1990 in having Topps, Fleer, and Bowman baseball cards.
Oh, wow. Well, on behalf of Heritage Sports Auctions, if those are still available.
And you were right about that December 10th, 11th auction on the comic books, comic art. That was great.
Yeah, that was an incredible
Yeah.
collection. For those
Yeah.
that don't know, Greg had this just wonderful collection. I'm going to get a little comic book nerdy for a second because that's my area, among other things, which is of just incredible Justice League, Justice Society team-ups, and the character of Dr. Fate, who's the guy with the gold helmet. If anybody saw Black Adam, but I mean, it looked like those were the things that he really loved as a kid.
Greg started with DC first.
Yep. It was
And
very
then
DC
after
heavy.
that, it's expanded into Marvel and stuff like that. But I remember when I was a kid, Greg called Daryl and myself, my brother, and he called us in and he says, "Hey, I got this comic." And I looked at it and I said, "Greg, did you pay $100 for this comic?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Greg, comics are a dime. You could buy 1,000." He says, "But this is More Fun number 51 with the Spectre being the first appearance of him." I went, "Oh, okay." That actually went pretty good.
It did pretty good.
Yeah, it did
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So right from the get-go, he was always that kind of a collector.
Yeah. And later on, when he got into high school, he started collecting scripts, and Batman stuff.
So that's my next question. So the TV and the movie stuff hits him early as well.
Well, see, the thing is, you remember when you said on one of your podcasts, you said he has all these photos and things like that. Well, one day I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Greg, why do you collect so many of these photos?" He says, "That's the only way you can tell if things are original or not." He had this loop that he used to use, and he would look at the photos and he would say, "Oh, this particular item." And he started collecting serial props first. And so, Zombies of the Stratosphere, things like that. So he started doing that at that point in time.
When we look outside there, I think everybody picks a different thing that's your favorite. Maybe you're a Star Trek fan, maybe you're a Star Wars fan, whatever. But for Greg, and you sort of talking about some of those movies like the zombie one and whatnot, it's those serials, right? That was really, that was the true love.
When we were kids, we'd be doing baseball in the driveway, football, but at night he would go and have us collect in front of the radio because there was no TV at that time. And we would listen to the Green Hornet, The Shadow, I Love Lucy, Amos and Andy, things like that. And then later on, it was when my grandmother, she was always the one that gets the TV first, right? We would then start watching the TV westerns, the Saturday cartoons. He would watch all the movies. I mean, everybody thinks that he was just a Star Trek guy. He watched every kind of movie you can imagine. He had us watch musicals, things like that. So I know about Busby Berkeley and why they do the Busby Berkeley dance thing from the top looking down, things like that. Greg would describe it and say, that's, you look for that all the time. So,
He once loaned me a VHS copy of Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS.
That's why, people think that you can categorize Greg as just looking at a certain particular TV series or something like that. No, he enjoyed all of the entertainment. And so that's why
I think that's
TV or movies. He enjoyed all of that. And he read like crazy. He was a voracious reader. He loved the Lone Ranger because we found, I think Ryan and I found something like 16 or 17 hard copy original Lone Ranger books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that Heritage has. And he loved Doc Savage, and he really liked John Carter of Mars. And even though the movie didn't turn out well and he worked on that one, he loved working.
The books are good.
Yeah, the looks on it.
Movie not so good.
Yeah. So.
Oh, Gene, you want to
Well, I
throw
was going to say,
something in,
I think it's part of human nature that you fall in love with your passions at a very early age, whether it's sports and baseball, whether it's the science fiction. I was 10 when Star Wars came out, so I'm a product of that generation, and things like that. And Greg is a product of being exposed to serials both in theaters, and being able to go to the movies and see serials in the movie theater the way they were originally intended to be seen, and that's an experience that sticks with you. And if you enjoy it, it becomes a passion. And then, he developed an entire career around it. And I'll speak a little bit about that later.
As Gene just said, Greg, was very passionate about seeing movies in the theater. And I found a letter he had just written just before he passed. And what it says is he was giving up his Academy membership because of the fact that they started to add streaming and things like that to it. So I was kind of like, oh, I didn't know that, at that point in time, but that's what he was about ready to do.
I want to jump forward into sort of the work a second, because I think, again, it's easy just to go, let's talk about the pieces. Let's talk about the pieces. But I do think it's sort of fascinating. There are chefs that don't eat their own cooking. You know what I mean? Like that they're just too disgusted by it. And yet Greg clearly both loved like the art of model making. He was into it. He loved the movie work. He loved doing it. And then he collected on it. And before we get to the collecting, Jerry, I just wanted to ask you, like, as a kid, would he talk about was working in the movies a dream job? Like, was that something he aspired to, talked about? Like, do you remember that?
I can tell you that Greg was very creative when he was a kid. He would sit there and, how most of us just do models and you get glue all over it. And when you painted it, you have fingerprints and stuff. Greg's stuff wasn't like that, and he was very particular about how things were. So if he was looking at a particular airplane, he wanted it to be the right color, everything. So with his reading and stuff, he would find out, like, he was big into World War I flying aces. And so he decided he wanted to make planes of the flying aces. And so he painted every one particular to that particular ace. And so when he did von Richthofen's circus, everybody thinks it's all red. No, every plane is a little bit different, and Greg made sure every one of his planes was a little bit different. So as a model maker, I noticed there was a video that said, oh, no, I was just an average model maker. He was very particular about everything he did. So that later on stemmed toward him becoming, going into art and things like that. And so what was funny about it was my aunts asked me, because they looked at him and said, at me, and he said, you think he's ever going to get a job? And I said, don't worry about him. He'll get a job. And, these guys can talk about the job.
I think that's a perfect segue to kind of move into sort of his professional life. Bill, when did you first, and then we'll get to John maybe next, but Bill, when did you meet Greg? How did you meet Greg? And what can you tell us about sort of, I guess, him, the model maker, if you will?
I met Greg at a science fiction convention in Los Angeles. This was after Star Wars came out, and it was very big and very popular.
Wait, Star Wars was big.
Yeah, it was. Oh. But everything kind of got pulled along with it. So I was living in San Diego. I went up to LA and I was displaying models that I was building because I loved Star Wars so much. I had to manifest that love in some way. And so I made my own replicas because back then they really didn't have model kits. So it was kind of the only option. It forced me to do that. And so I was showing him at a Doug Wright convention. And I look over and I see Greg, and I knew who he was because I had seen articles about him in various magazines, and just struck up a conversation with him and asked him about materials. I never asked him for a job. I just was picking his brain. Super nice guy. And eventually he asked for my number and offered me a job.
Wow.
On Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was a dream
Double
for me.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was a production assistant, a PA, entry-level position. And I wasn't in the union. So during the day, I was basically driving around his van, picking stuff up. And then he would let me do a little model work in the evenings and on the weekends.
Is there anything, and then John, I'm going to come down to you to ask the same question maybe. Like, if this makes any sense, like as somebody who ultimately did the same work, what was it about Greg's work? Like, just like was there something about him as a model maker, or anything about the way he went about it that, I don't know, made him so special? I mean, there's a reason he worked on these incredible projects. I mean,
well, obviously he was super passionate about that, and that was infectious. That, I had this weird love of models, and then all of a sudden I'm working for a guy who has the same love, and it just motivated me to learn and to do better. And I think, honestly, one of the reasons Greg, I think there's two real reasons Greg was in the industry. One, it gave him connections,
Sure.
so he could find collectible. But the other was he cut out the middleman. If he was working on a Star Trek project, the likelihood of him just making an extra casting or something, it's like,
No, of course, but he was really good too. Not everybody builds for Steven Spielberg. I mean, I'm just sort of saying I agree with you. I just wondered, I guess, I all kidding aside though, like just I heard a great story. Let me jump to here and then we'll come down there for a second, which was I won't say names because I can't tell if anybody wants names anymore. But it was a show in the 90s and they had like basically less than a month to do this very complicated model shop. And they got a hold of Greg's number and they called him up and he kind of laughed at them and hung up, like laughed at them on the phone and hung up. And then 24 hours later, he called back and went, I think I know how we can do this. And basically did this insane shot basically 2 weeks later in the middle of the night with the camera, cranked down and everything blew up, but they got the 2 seconds they needed. And, and there's something about that guy that when I hear that story, I get excited about the guy that goes, it's impossible. No, wait a minute. I figured it out. And was that your experience in terms of working with him?
Absolutely. I don't ever remember him like drawing plans or anything like that. As always, he knew exactly how to approach a project.
So cool.
And the other thing that I learned from him was he knew how to cheat. He knew how to get away with things that is fast and efficient. Like you don't have to build everything. Sometimes things are textural. And he just had such a great eye for how to create something fast and efficient and have it be absolutely accurate.
That's amazing. Mr. Eaves, down to you a little bit, if that's okay, because you sort of got to know him as a young gentleman as well, but also in the world of work modeling. Yes.
I learned about Greg. This is back in the old days before internet. We had Cinefex magazine and Starlog, and that's where I discovered Greg Jein. And
Really, sorry, I'm going to interrupt really quickly. For those of you at home, magazines are bound paper documents sewn together with text that you read at home. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
But thanks to Star Wars and Close Encounters, it started the genre where these magazines were just like full of these wonderful articles. And I lived in Phoenix, and Cinefex 13 was the first Cinefex came out. That's where I learned about Bill. He was like my hero. He was on every other page building the Jedi stuff. And I was on a quest to find older Cinefex. And the first one I got was the one that had Greg Jein, the miniature giant, in the back of it. It's a wonderful article. And so I tracked him down, found him in Marina Del Rey. I actually called the information 411 in the phone. Oh, we have Greg Jein in Marina Del Rey. And that's how I called him up.
I'm sorry, I should interrupt here for a second. For those of you at home, information 411. Okay, well, we used to have phones in our houses that were wired into the walls, and you would dial 411, and someone would tell you somebody else's phone number. Anyway, continue. Sorry. Yeah.
So that's how I met him, and he invited me out to see his shop. This was 1984, and he was working on, I want to say, it might have been Buckaroo Banzai, but he was molding some stuff. And I kept in contact with him. Very sweet, nice man. I walked by going, wow, that guy's great. I wish I could get into Hollywood. And when I finally did, I started at Apogee, and he started on a project there at the same time, and we met again, and he brought me onto his shop there. But one of the most amazing things about Greg as a model maker is he loved the underdog, and he would see talent in you or potential, and he would let you exploit it. And Jason Kaufman over here, Kenny Swenson, these two guys, we all work with Greg under the same thing. He would bring you in. He'd always bring in seasoned model makers to handle the heavy stuff, but to get people started, he'd bring us in and give us these incredible, intense projects to see how you'd handle it. And he'd help you problem solve if you needed, but he'd let you go. And so learning to make models through Greg he gave you opportunities that no one else ever would have sanely, because he put a lot of trust in what you could do. And remarkable, man. His talent was unbelievable. And he had a crude style of model making. It wasn't super polished. He'd find stuff on the floor. We'd go to the thrifty drugstore. We were looking for nozzles for rockets, and would look at VO5 shampoo bottle caps. Go, that one's good. And we'd go to the chip aisle, and that was when all the chips were coming out in canisters. Ooh, this canister's fabulous. We'd take these home and make generators and stuff. Just amazing. There was nothing that you couldn't look at that wouldn't become a model. And so everything he saw, had a different life aside from what it really was. And amazing man.
That's very, very cool. Mr. Billings, how did you come into contact? Was it initially as a fan?
No, actually,
please.
a friend of mine, I was collecting at the time, a friend of mine called me and said, do you know Greg? And I said, well, I know Greg,
So,
but I had never met
but
him.
already a reputation, Greg,
Oh,
already
absolutely.
the reputation.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay.
Reading in magazines,
Sure.
you know, and but I really had no concept of the collection part of it at that point. I knew of the filmmaking part of it. And I called him and he invited me to come to his shop in the marina. And I walked in and I looked around and I went, nobody cleans this place, do they? You know, because I mean, for those of you fortunate enough to have been into his shop at some point in time, you'll know exactly what I mean. And he brought me in open arms. It was amazing. It really was. And I stood there and talked to him. And I think he put up with me because I had nothing to ask him about Star Trek. Nothing. I didn't, that wasn't my genre at that point, but you know, the more I talked to him, the more I realized this is a major collector and I'm viewing him, I'm asking him questions about the movies that he worked on and looking around and seeing parts all over going, what is that? Oh, that belongs to Steven Spielberg. That's from Amazing Stories. And it's like, what's it doing there? Well, we couldn't get it into his house. So, you know, so yeah, he with open arms. And then through the years, he kept inviting me back.
Do you think
And
there's
I
a
ended up
chance?
moving in about a mile from his home. So I got for a good 12 years, there was a lot of, he stopped by my house on the way home from work and I'd be working on projects and he was very supportive. I'm not a model maker. I'm not in Hollywood, but he would stop by and give me tips. And it was like, you know, I've got Greg Jein sitting here giving me tips how to build a model. It was amazing.
When you mentioned the shop, Gene here goes, oh my God, I got a story.
So Greg's shop was in Marina Del Rey in a little light industrial area. They just knocked it down last year and it made me sad. But it was a former dairy in the 1930s, 1940s. And so his shop was in one of the stalls. And to get into his shop, you had to go down this ramp. And there was dust everywhere. And there was stuff piled up everywhere. And so every time I went down this ramp, it was kind of steep with all this dust. I was always afraid one of two things was going to happen. I was either going to slip, land on my ass, and make a fool out of myself, or even worse, I was going to launch forward and land on a Klingon ship from phase 2 or some Robbie the Robot part or some Lost in Space part and go crashing into this stuff. And that was my greatest fear. It never actually happened. And I got lucky in that way. But the other thing, sort of the first day on the job story, you know, I go there and it's like, okay, where's my workbench? What and
But back up just
no, hang on a second.
Okay.
No, this is good.
Okay. Well, I'll be the judge of that.
And I don't know if it was Jason or if it was Dave Chamberlain, but someone said, you know, grab that garbage can and move it over here. So I pull it over. They grab a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of plywood, wham, on top of the garbage can, and it's like, there's your desk. That was it. And because
I've heard stories like that before.
we made it work, you know, and we were, you know, literally making desks out of, you know, on top of boxes, and God knows what was in those boxes.
I wanted to back you up just a touch to, you're talking about your first day of work. Did you seek out working for Greg Jein?
Yeah.
Take us back to that a little bit, if you don't mind.
I was at USC Film School and I had conned my way into an internship on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And they sent me down as a runner to drop something off at Greg's shop. And they go, do you know who Greg is? And I go, of course I know who Greg is. I've known who he is since I was about 15 years old and getting into visual effects. And again, just like everyone else has said, he's very generous, especially with beginners and newcomers. We chatted a little bit. I said that it was, you know, a pleasure to meet you. All of that stuff, did my job. And then you know, went back to Paramount. And then a couple of years, about a year later, I ran into him again, having to pick something up. I said, hey, can I send you my resume? And he said, yeah. And then one day he calls me up and he said, I need an extra pair of hands. And I can't remember where, Jason, we were either doing Deep Space Nine. I can't remember which came first, Deep Space Nine, the pilot, or the Dyson Sphere episode where Scotty comes back, Relics. Yeah, it's all a blur. And yeah, we still have some of the dust in our lungs. And, one of my fondest memories is, even out of that chaotic environment, it was a wonderful little workshop. There was a Robbie the robot that he had built that had, a cover over the glass. And it's like, whatever you do, don't damage Robbie because the customer hasn't picked it up yet. But, as dusty as it would be, he would buy us lunch occasionally. We would have pizza and stuff like that. He would have, in the summer, he would put on a Dodgers baseball game. And even though I wasn't into sports, there's something about listening to Vin Scully and working on a model and Greg and just sort of this communal atmosphere. Jason was very welcoming. Dave was very welcoming, to me, because I wasn't a really good model maker, but I was an extra pair of hands. And it was fun. And it was working for Greg. It was like someone, that I kind of knew since I was a kid. And you don't get to meet your heroes all that often. And sometimes they turn out to be dicks. And Greg wasn't a dick.
I'll throw one thing in before I get to you, Joe, which is on that same story I told before about Greg sort of saying no and then saying yes. He was sort of asked later, why did you say yes? Why did you do it? And apparently the quote was, well, I also realized my guys needed work. And I thought that was really cool, that he kind of took on this impossible gig because his things were slow at the moment. And I'm not talking about like food on the table slow, but like his guys needed work. So he took a gig, which I just to hear stories like that.
He did that with me. He said, here, take this spaceship and paint it, it's brown, put some purple on there and weather it and come back in 3 days and I'll pay you for a week, kind of thing. That's the kind of guy he was.
Joe, your turn. When did you first become aware of Greg Jein and meet Greg Jein?
Different experience. I came to California in '79, and back then we used to have shows that you could actually attend in person, and they actually had I think it was the Galaxy Theater in Hollywood or one of those buildings. And
there's so much to unpack there. A movie theater is where people go to see a movie with other. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
The chariot from Lost in Space that's sitting out in that room was sitting on the floor next to the B-9 robot and a Jupiter 2. And there was this display. And I was like, oh my God, what are these? Right. So these belong to Greg Jein. I'm like, who's Greg Jein? Like, I want to buy these. I'm like, what is this all about? So somebody told me who he was, and I approached him, and I'm like, are these for sale? No, they're not. And I'm like, how do you have these? Like, who are you? So we just started up a friendship, and I started my company in '85, and Greg was always, my relationship with him was completely different. It was always about, hey, I found this. What is it? He would bring it in. What's this? And it was always sharing information. He would have things that like, do you think this is real? Do you think this is real? And this was a time where, we didn't have Blu-rays. We weren't able to screen match things. We're looking at a TV set, taking pictures of it with a real camera, trying to say we screen matched it, but we didn't. And it was just years of that relationship where as profiles developed, Brian was a fixture in our lives, where he would always come over with a box of stuff and take it out on the table and compare what you had to what he had. And, that's Greg.
That's fantastic. And for those of you at home, we lost John Billings, but we gained Brian Chanis down there at the end. And Brian, I know obviously you've worked with Joe for a very long time. Is that how you met Greg as well, or like is that basically him?
It was completely through Profiles in History. Yes, and Greg, I've always heard of him, and one day, he called and he said, I have something that I want to consign, and excited. He didn't tell me what it was. I just said, whatever he has, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a great segue to meeting him. And he came in with a crate that was about 7 feet long. And out came the hero Proteus submarine from Fantastic Voyage. I mean, it was a monumental thing for the, sci-fi people like us. And, it's the close-up hero. And ever since then, especially when it comes to Star Trek, I grew up being in the syndication years, being a huge Star Trek fan. And I would always consult with him when we would get a tunic in. He'd come in, a communicator, whatever it may be. And he was truly open about his wisdom. And he was always learning along the way too. And he was just an incredible human being, sharing. He wanted to keep the hobby clean. And I mean, there's one of the best pictures I can tell you about him was that story that he ended up acquiring a bunch of bad things that were not real at one time. And we found out exactly what happened. It was a fellow that made forgeries of props. And we found out exactly what happened because the guy's fiance ended up finding out that he was cheating on her. And she was helping him make these fake things. So you know exactly what to look for, and they're easy to tell now. So, there's no issue with that. But he was taken in the early days. And what he did one by one was target the people that he had traded things to, thinking that they were real. And in fact, he made it right. He squared them. So, I mean, it's not like he forgot about it or I won't tell anyone about this. He ended up buying them all back, basically. So he had a bucket of bad things that were made by this guy, but that was the type of person that he was. He wanted to make sure that everything was clean and everything was in the right spirit of the hobby, so to speak.
Yeah, that's incredible. So we're all sitting here, and right outside those doors, we're sort of, and I think one of the things, Greg's always been very generous about lending things to certain museums, the Smithsonian. I know anyone that lives in Los Angeles, sometimes you'd go to a screening of something like at a revival or something, and maybe there'd be a costume or a prop like sitting in the lobby a little bit because he was, he was always very generous of like, oh, hey, it's that movie, I've got something, and they kind of put it up, for the fans and whatnot. But really, in this room outside there, we're kind of getting to see, and it's not all of it, but we're seeing a lot of his collection on mannequins, in display cases, like really in a way perhaps that if I understand what his workshop looked like, if I understand what his house looked like, not quite the way it was ever kept. So this is something he really never saw, and you guys never saw till now. I guess, what do you think he would think? And I know there's no right answer. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone?
That's a question for Jerry, probably.
Yeah. Let's start with Jerry.
You get two of them. No? I think Greg would have appreciated it because, Greg's collection was all over the place. It was never in display cases that much. He had a few display cases and they weren't organized very well. But the thing is that you couldn't actually sit there and say, oh, he actually is displaying these things in the way it should be. I know that he at times sent things to the museums so that they would clean it and return it clean. So that's one of the things that he was actually trying to send his items to the Screwball. My nephew Michael was going to help him pack everything up and send it to the Screwball for the Star Trek convention so he could get it cleaned and insured and all that. But he never got a chance because he was in the hospital at the time. And so I know that he would have been pretty happy the way everything is displayed right now because it's never actually looked like that. I keenly tell Brian, I said, boy, that thing's actually cleaned up okay, huh? But if you had seen it when we had picked it up, it was not one of those things that he kept in really good condition, and that's probably why it's preserved so well. It's just that he would collect it, put it somewhere, and then he would know where it was, but nobody else did, and so it was up to us to find it through the 10,000 books, the 10,000 DVDs and Blu-rays and everything else that he had in the house. And so that's, that was the thing that we were able to do with the help of Heritage and his friends and my family, and so it worked out well.
I think he probably would have said, part of him would have said, "What are you guys doing here? It's just stop." And then he would have turned and left. But I think in his heart of hearts, he would have been, proud and happy. At least that's the version I'm choosing to believe. At certain times, he just would say, "Tell them that it all went up in a fire," and because we were discussing, it's like, what do you want to have happen with this? And, I could tell he was done talking about it when he said, "Just tell them it all burned in a fire." And it's like a Viking funeral. And he goes, "Yeah." And it's like, but no one puts that much effort, that much passion, that much money and stuff like that just to see it go. So, it's a little bit sad to see the collection split up and sent to the four winds, but at the same time, kind of like plants sending out, seeds on the wind and stuff like that. Maybe this is, for the best, and it's the best way to go because it's going to go and it's going to be cared for. And, I'd like to think that the people who become the new owners, the new caretakers for it, will keep it and preserve it and, not just see it as a trophy or something that represents a show that they saw as a kid, but they'll think about the people, John and Bill and Jason and Ken and Dave Chamberlain and, and hundreds of other people who worked on this stuff that don't generally get credit for it. And the efforts that we put into it, because we had as much fun building it as they are hopefully going to have owning it.
Just one thing, if you've seen Amazing Stories with Steven Spielberg, he had an episode where they had a collector, and I think Mark Hamill was the older person. Greg always thought that Steven had
Based it on him.
and
Oh.
not him.
I like
So
that.
That's
I like
what he
that.
told Sharon and I at one time. He says, "I think Steven stole my life." That's what happened.
That's pretty good.
It's odd seeing it this way. If you work with Greg, one of the fun things was working at his shop is you discover these things by accident, like the chariot out there. I was cleaning his shop one day, and he has a vacuum.
So at least somebody was cleaning the shop. That's
I got in
good. Yeah.
trouble for it.
Yeah.
But he,
Are you talking about the back room?
no, this was out on the floor.
Okay.
But he had a vacuum form machine, which is a machine that heats plastic and the air sucks out and it makes a mold of whatever you put on it. And he had one size, and it was this big, but it vacuum formed little pieces. And so it'd save all the plastic for other projects. And so it was stacked to the ceiling. I'm slowly picking those out. And I go, wow, you did this, and that. I get the bottom of the license plate chariot is under all of this plastic. Like, what is this doing under here? This is so cool. Greg, come out here. And he goes, oh, yeah, I was looking for that. And that's the way it was. You discover these things. And he, like we were saying, he has a display case in the back. He didn't put much in display cases, but he had a case in the back, the corner. He had the B-17 from Amazing Stories back there. You walk around that, and I didn't know what the movie was, but there's like a little weenie spaceship and some. And I'm going, ooh, what's Greg doing back here? Then find out later that his first movie was Flesh Gordon, and these were the models from it. And he kept those back there. And for Christmas one year, the DVD came out. He gave us to it. We all went to watch. Went,
Yeah.
it's a special movie. Is all there is to it. But
I was going to say, I noticed that none of the Flesh Gordon stuff is out there.
Oh, no.
Oh, is there a couple? Oh, okay. I missed it then. No, I guess it was so blocked by all you people like in front of it. Jesus. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So
It's there. All right.
did you ever go in his like gold room? The one, yeah. So I was there, and there was this one room that was always double padlocked, and it's like, oh, what's behind there? And one day it was open, and Greg went in there, and it was cracking. It's like, okay, I got to see. And I knew he collected stuff because I saw, the Klingon ships and stuff. And I followed, and it was like, holy shit! This was, the stuff was out there. It was packed, but you could see it. It's like, there's an Enterprise model, a really good Enterprise model. There's, Koenig's spacesuit from Space 1999. There was all this stuff, and it was like, Dr. Carter in Tutankhamun's tomb, and Greg saw me in there and it's like, get out. And it's like, too late. I'm looking around, and it was like an Aladdin's cave. Did you see was he collecting when you were on Star Trek?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He had the storage areas up in Van Nuys, and this was after he had done the hall at Fox.
Yeah.
And there were just racks and racks of airplanes, and a lot of them we couldn't identify. But the robot was there, the Jupiter 2s were there. But yeah, he always had that passion for collecting, and it was absolutely right. You never knew what you were going to stumble across.
Or stumble into or kick.
Yeah, and that's, you were asking about how do we feel about this. I mean, I think this is amazing. This is his legacy. This is his life and his passion. But at the same time, I was used to seeing it just kind of on the ground with a bunch of crap on top of it. And so it's really kind of shocking to see it in these well-lit, beautiful cases. I mean, you guys have done an incredible job of presenting it.
The alternative design for this evening was we were going to kind of get a lot of garbage and then just it would have been bury the pieces kind of, and you just stumble around.
But that was one of the dichotomies of Greg, was that he was so into this, but at the same time, he didn't treat it as all that precious.
Would he talk about the collecting with you? Like, was it a topic? Like, would he ever say like, hey, I got something great, or it kept it separate from the work?
He would just show up with it.
Show up with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just be working.
And he came up and worked at ILM for a couple years. He was working on Batteries Not Included, but then we also did Next Generation. We built the Enterprise D, and he was involved in that. And he would just show up one day with the Galactica shuttle. I was like, where'd that come from?
Well, one thing I will say, or two things real quick, is one is it's one of the things I love about the catalog. Every now and then you get a catalog that kind of goes on your shelf. And I know for me, I'm just throwing this in. This for me is a on the shelf catalog, because that room won't always exist, although I took a bunch of pictures, but that catalog will exist for collectors the way there are only like maybe 6 or 7 other catalogs like that. Debbie Reynolds comes to mind. And so the book as a document of him and the collection and his passions, I think is extra, and the little stories that are in the write-ups is really cool. And I know a lot of you obviously had a lot to do with that.
The other thing is, as a historian and an archivist and stuff like that, I actually refer to the old MGM catalogs and the 20th Century Fox catalogs, trying to find out, does this have a listing? Does it have any type of, provenance, and what history? What can I learn from it? And the descriptions in the older catalogs are just painfully blank.
And by the way, and no pictures, and
no pictures,
too. Yeah.
and stuff like that. So these become the historical record. And so, like I said, I really hope people appreciate the effort that Heritage put into it, as well as the fact that you are getting something from the Greg Jein collection. That's some type of seal of approval. At least in my book, it is.
Joe, you guys did Debbie Reynolds all those years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is similar but different.
Yeah, Debbie Reynolds, these are like bookends almost.
Yeah.
So Debbie Reynolds had the greatest film collection in the world, and it was very specific, right? Just like this. But at the time, that's where collecting was.
Right, very costume heavy.
Very costume heavy, very vintage costume, and times have changed. I don't know how well Debbie Reynolds would even be received now, her collection. So this is they're very, very different, but maybe better. I mean, it's hard to compare, right? Yeah. But it's like if I could pick one of the collections, I'd rather have this one.
Certainly, I was going to say, as for the modern collector, I appreciated the heck out of the Debbie Reynolds catalog, and I have my Debbie Reynolds catalog. But this is the one where, well, here I am in Dallas. You know what I mean? Yeah.
At the time, we had 15,000 people at the preview.
Yeah.
Over a week, 15 lines around the building in Beverly Hills. We sold, I don't know how many tens of thousands of catalogs, but it was like a worldwide phenomenon. Where this too is like, we've had people from all over the world interested. Just like people have waited, I hate to say this, for years for this to happen, because I used to kid Greg, oh, do you want to do this? Like, we can do this, it's like, and he would just shake his head and walk away, and he thought about it, right? So for I guess Brian and I in the company, it's kind of like, this is so much more than a business transaction or anything like that. It's like I wanted to make sure that what we created and what we brought tonight was a goodbye to Greg. Like this is so much more than just a commercial thing. This is about, it's the greatest collection of its kind in the world.
I really do believe that. You guys all knew him. If this wasn't, this is going to be a slightly confusing question. This is my Barbara Walters question. By the way, for those of you at home, Barbara Walters was sort of this old lady that used to ask famous people questions. Anyway, she's dead. She can't sue. If this was not Greg Jein's collection and Greg were here, what do you think he would be looking around this room going, I have to have?
All of it. No, seriously, I mean, the childhood passion with, you know, collecting, and then Batman with the superhero, Green Hornet, that I knew he was into from, you know, day one. Then the Star Trek costumes. I mean, he's got to be one of the top 3, you know, collections of Star Trek props in the world. I mean, if not,
I was about to say, what 2 other ones are you talking about?
It would take one.
Okay, fine.
Paul Allen would be number 2.
Okay, great.
Like there's no secret what he has. So
Yeah.
and then it's a steep drop off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So yeah, he would say, I want it all, you know, and
But as we would, everybody, anybody who's a collector in this room, I'm assuming all of you guys, if you could write a blank check and walk out with it, you would. You wouldn't be like, oh, leave these behind. We'd all take it all.
Oh, I'm planning on writing a blank check. It's not, the check is not good, but I'm going to write it to you and then run. But yeah.
We want it all. You want all the Star Trek costumes. Who are we kidding?
I will say it is amazing to me. And again, I know he loved it all. When I see stuff and read about like the, forgive me, the Laurel and Hardy, the bus. I mean, God, that is both special to see, but also what it meant to him. Jerry, was that a movie that you remember like seeing with him, or do you remember anything from that particular
Before he
piece?
passed away, I asked him the question. I said, you know, what item here is the most important thing to you? And I was thinking he was going to say something about Star Trek and stuff like that, but he pointed at the doorway of my aunt's bedroom and said, see that bus? I said, yeah, that's my favorite. And I said, why? He says, I remember seeing Laurel and Hardy and remembering that bus on the roller coaster. And it was so realistic. And I knew it was a miniature, but it was so realistic. I had to get it. And so Loser Turvin had told me, he said, Greg knew where it was. It was on the 20th Century Fox lot. And he wanted it so bad. He kept going back to 20th Century and said, can I have it? And so I guess Lou told me, he says, Fox had gotten to the point that they were starting to have to sell things off and things like that. And they said to Greg, give us this much money. You can have anything on the lot. And all he wanted was that bus. But then he ended up, and you'll see a lot of the 20th Century Fox stuff. He got that stuff with it at the time.
Yeah.
But that bus was his favorite.
Yeah.
well,
The bus was his favorite.
and we heard it, and this is sort of the disappointing thing about Greg not being here, is because we can't confirm these stories. So I heard a variation on that story where he went to get the bus, and they said, we agree to your price, but you can't cherry pick. You can't just take the bus. You have to take all of this stuff as well, because 20th Century Fox the lot was contracting. And it's now present day Century City. There were still some storage sheds on both the Malibu Ranch and on the 20th Century Fox lot that is now Century City. And they were trying to just get rid of all that stuff. And it was about to go into a bulldozer. So they said, you can come and you can get the bus or whatever else you want, but you have to take this. And that's why he wound up with all the other stuff as well. And because it was all stuff that was going to be thrown out. And, you know, God bless Greg for saving, you know, that stuff.
Well, I mean, so much of this stuff, and I mean, anecdotally, you know, it's sort of funny to make fun of now. He was not shy about a dumpster dive. I mean, I think we can all say that very politely and whatnot. But
who
let's
here
be honest,
isn't shy about a
but let's be
dumpster
honest,
dive?
this stuff would have been gone. I mean,
In a landfill.
yeah, it would have just it'd be gone. And I don't know.
You know, one of the things was is that Greg, after Star Trek closed, right? And then Desi Lou was closing down at that point in time. He comes back home and he says, "Hey, come here, take a look at this." And so I go in there and he starts bringing all the Star Trek stuff. And so I said, "Where'd you get that?" He says, "I got it from the dumpster." And I said,
Oh my gosh.
"You did?" He goes, "Yeah." And then he shows me a letter, and it's signed by Gene Roddenberry saying, "Greg Jein is allowed to take anything out of this dumpster at this point in time." Right? And so when Paramount rebooted Star Trek, they wanted everything back. But he showed them the letter, so that's why he had to keep it.
Oh, wow.
So, Brian and I and Michael Mansfield and I were trying to find that letter, but we never did find
Oh,
it.
that's like a Willy Wonka
Yeah.
golden ticket right there.
Yeah, but Sharon saw the letter, and so yeah.
Wait,
He has it in the binder?
Lou probably has it. We'll find it.
Well, I was just going to say, whoever on the planet Earth finds that letter is entitled to the entire collection. Go!
It's a mad world of props.
Is there? I just always curious, just to keep talking a little bit about the props, and then I have a couple other things I want to talk about, and someone will tell me when we're supposed to end because I have no idea. And also, I was supposed to tell everyone, or at least those of you at home, that there's pictures running throughout this entire thing of just pictures of some of the props, some of Greg working, the model shop, whatever. Not for us, but for those of you at home. So that's what you are seeing put together by the wonderful Mr. Gene Kozicki. So thank you for that. Do you guys individually, we can just go right down the line for whether it's your own personal love or the connection to Greg or whatever it is, do you have a favorite piece and why out there today that you associate with Greg? Or something, whether you're bidding on it or not, but just something that is a favorite or a fond memory, I guess is my question.
I bid and lost already.
You've already been outbid. Oh.
I was a huge fan of the Dark Star. And one, it was a Greg Jein model, one of his earliest. It's a first John Carpenter movie. It's designed by Ron Cobb, filmed by Bill Taylor. All these wonderful people we got to meet and know. And it's a milestone model, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I'm glad to see that it's here. But, it's funny, Greg, in a way, made us all collectors. Just getting to know him, he'd introduce you to this world. I came from Arizona, where if you wanted Navajo rugs, that's all you get. But he introduced us to Comic-Con and comics.
I did need to interrupt really quickly. Heritage's Navajo department would like to tell you that there'll be an exciting auction of Navajo rugs next week for those of you interested. Sorry, continue. Yeah.
That's right, and I've seen all of them, and they're all cool.
And Kachina dolls also.
But
Kachina
that's
dolls,
what I like, that in the 1941 stuff. But it's hard being here, those of us that work with him, to see this. This is almost, I don't know, it's out of the ordinary, the way it's displayed. So it's very heart-wrenching to be here and see it this way. It's kind of a farewell. But it's beautiful, it's going to go to other homes now, and other people are going to get to enjoy what he collected. And the display is just remarkable. It was amazing walking through here, filled with tears at the same time as seeing it all. But Dark Stars for me. But, well, someone else is getting it now. But
Brian, do you have a favorite?
May I have the microphone? Yes. No, because of Greg's passion for the original series, it has to be the Type 2 Hero phaser pistol. As a kid growing up, going home to watch the Star Trek every day after school and seeing that thing, cobbled together wooden phasers before the AMT model came out. And that one is the cat's pajamas.
But of course, Greg would always take it apart. So when we went to look for it, there was a piece there and a piece there. Brian would call me up and he's like, "We only found half of it." I'm like, "What do you mean? How did you only find half of it? What is happening here?" And it'd be like, because Greg would take everything apart. So on that subject, for years, I wanted that chariot sitting out there from Lost in Space. So I would say to Brian, Greg's coming in. I'm like, "Work on the chariot." It might be time. Offer him X. Greg was like, "Oh, I know he wants it." And it was just decades. So finally, Brian called. I'm like, I didn't care about anything else. I'm like, "Where's the chariot?" He's like, "Oh, we can't find the treads." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He took it apart. So the treads were loser than had the treads, but it's very funny that it's there, but it is, as John said, it is sad in a way to be like saying goodbye to our friend.
So I was over at Greg's one night, and he pointed up on a cabinet, and he goes, see that box up there? Grab that box and bring it down. And I did. And I was holding it and he goes, open it up. And I said, Greg, do I need to steel myself for this? And he goes, yes, you do. And I opened it up and it was Shatner's toupee. And I mean, certainly there's some amazing items out there, but for me, that was just Greg's humor. It's just such an odd thing. And that to me represents Greg and his collecting and how weird and wonderful it was.
Not knowing him at all, I'll get to you in 1 second. Not knowing him at all, I had no idea he was so funny. I love hearing some of these stories. I felt like that was something I just had. Again, you know, he was just a very famous guy to me. He loved shook fireworks. His hand once, but yeah, what was the hot foot on you, John? You want to tell the audience probably does not know this story.
I was sharing this story. Yeah. And Greg liked fire. That was his favorite thing. He liked it way too much. And his shop was an atom bomb ready to go off. When you'd go in there, he had dust and wood and all this stuff. But he would like to sneak up on you and kind of look over your shoulder, see what you're doing. And he had this metal chair. And he's looking at something I'm working on. And he walks away. And I felt the chair getting really hot. And all of a sudden I see flicker and I look under. My chair's on fire. And I look around and he's out in the parking lot jumping up and down laughing. And what he had done is he had these like ketchup and mustard squirt bottles. They were full of acetone, so he squirted a big puddle under my chair and made a liquid fuse. He was way out, so when the shop blew up, he'd be safe. And he'd like that. So you see this Back to the Future stream of fire. And if you'd go in the bathroom, if you thought you were in there too long, there's a gap under the door. He'd spray 77 spray with a match on it, flamethrower under the door. Yeah. This was all the time. The fire jokes never ended. And Halloween's his birthday, so we'd always get a pumpkin and hid car or whatever, and by the end of the night, it's on fire out in the parking lot. But
he also had
a jokester.
He had a jacket and he had a lab coat and it said, "How's my modeling?" Embroidered on the back. Call 1-800-EAT, something on the back. But look, I'm a child of Star Wars. I saw it when I was 10, so profoundly influenced by that. So the X-Wing is obviously of interest.
Oh, well, for those of you at home and over in here, I believe, and I'm not sure about this, I was never told this, but I'd like to think that it was Greg's sort of fondest wish that I were to have that. And that no one were to bid on it against me tomorrow. I think it would, wherever he is, put a smile on his face if I were to get it for the opening bid. So please, just go along with Greg's wishes, please. Thank you.
But here's the other thing. Thanks to Greg and listening to the radio shows and stuff like that, he got me into the serials and stuff like that.
So you would listen to The Shadow? Or stuff,
and stuff like that, and even watch some of the old Republic things because he would give me VHSs and stuff like that. Say, here, take a look at that. It's like, oh wow, and so I gained an appreciation for those that sort of came before me in this industry, and the efforts the Lydecker brothers and those guys, and so the more I work on CG based stuff right now, quite frankly, the more interested I become in the old wire tape rubber band style of L.B. Abbott and the Lydecker brothers and Buddy Gillespie and stuff like that. So, I thank Greg for sort of rounding out my helping round out my tastes as well. Still want to bid on the X-Wing though.
You would be really pissing him off.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, he really, this was his dying wish that I had.
Maybe it was karma that we found it.
Was it weird? I will ask this. I'm assuming, and you guys have made mention of it, I guess the going through his stuff, it just hard. I mean, there's no way of other than saying it. Obviously, Jerry, you were dealing with it all. And
well, for us, it was basically looking at the pictures. The things that remind you.
Yeah.
The one thing that I was going through a lot of the family photos and ostensively looking for references and things like that because we have some ideas what we want to do with some of Greg's collections and setting up a paper collection or something like that. That's down the road. But just seeing the incredible connection of the family and the friends and all of that, which we got a new appreciation of someone that we worked with and we were close to. We found artwork that he did as a kid
Oh, wow.
that was, and he drew airplanes and battles and stuff like that. And occasionally there was the spaceship, but there were monsters in there. And I would say this, by high school, he was a really good artist. I was looking at some of this, like these were like costume type sketches because he was doing figure studies, but there was some of them had a very twisted a sense of humor. There was, if you ever took an art class, they always had you draw your hand, pose your left hand here and with your right hand, draw what your hand. So he drew a foot instead, but it had a toe tag on it.
Seems about right.
So, finding that, and I can't say how many times we said, we went, damn it, Greg, because like Joe was saying, we would only find half of something. And it's like he would wander through the house just like we all do, and he would put something down. And then by the time, the phone rang or something like that, he forgot where he put it. And something else got pushed there. So we were going like that. And then we were going, why couldn't you have told us the story of how you got this, and things like that. Stories left untold. But we also found some really, good, like I said, photos and stuff like that. And we really came to, appreciate, Greg. Oh, come on. Don't let me be the last word.
I mean, I feel like this is there, this is going to sound a little bit an odd question, but I'll go for it anyway. Is there anything, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's sort of the question about the question, which is there something that we didn't bring up? Is there something that we didn't know about Greg that we would be surprised, or one of you guys
Amazing
like
Christmas cards.
I've heard tell.
Yeah. If you know, and if you don't, it's something for you to look up.
Not available for auction. We'll just simply say, not available for auction.
Every year, Brian and I put them on my desk for the entire year. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is probably the perfect end.
Yeah, we have to end it with a laugh.
I think that is a perfect end, other than, of course, reminding you Greg's dying wish that nobody bid on the X-Wing. Once again, and the family's here. Jerry wants you to know that he doesn't want anybody bidding on it either. Jerry's here to let us say that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please check out, I'm going to do my one plug. Please check out the Stuff the Dreams Are Made Of, Props podcast hosted by me and Ryan Condell, and sponsored by the wonderful Heritage Auctions. Thank you, everyone. Bid. Make sure you have a catalog. Keep it in good condition. Get a second catalog so you don't have to write in one. You have one mint one for your bookshelf. I just think this is just going to be a truly special 2 days. And thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing these stories. It was wonderful. Thank you.